Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Monday, December 17th, 2012 to order. It is our last regular council meeting before the holiday, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all here in attendance and to council and staff as well. And you'll see the chamber is decorated up very nicely with some of the artwork of the students that put it forward for the Christmas card contest. It's very nice to see that again. So again, happy holidays. We will begin with invocation, followed by the singing of the national anthem. And the invocation will be led by Councillor King, and the national anthem by Councillor Papp, and I would ask all to rise.
Dear God, who has given us grace to make our common goals unto Thee, and who does promise that when two or more are gathered together in Thy name, You will grant their requests. Fulfill now, O Lord, the petitions of Thy servants, as may be expected of them. Grant all in this council chamber the knowledge of trust, justice, and honor in all considerations placed before them. Amen.
Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patron all, in all thy Son's command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It has been moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the agenda for the December 17th, 2012 regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any additions, changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Do any members of council have any disclosures they'd like to disclose at this time? Can that be noted in the minutes, please? Thank you. The next item is hearing and presentations of delegations. We have two delegations this evening. The first is one that we were to have a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of meetings ago, but Mr. Torzis couldn't join us then, but he's here this evening, and it's regarding timeframes to comply with property standards bylaw. Mr. Torzis, please come up to the podium here. And we understand that you're going to give us sort of a broad brush, general nature of the issue. So go ahead, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Mayor Dave, members of the council, and ladies and gentlemen. My name's Nick. I'm 70 years old, and I'm a resident of the town of Pelham for 30 years. I live on an acre and a half rural property. The property has about 300 trees around it that are 30 or 40 feet high, and I'm a car collector. Been that all my life, and a lot of people out in the country are collectors of one thing or another. That's why we're out in the country. And I've never had any problems for 30 years over there. And at the beginning of the year, apparently they had a complaint about derelict cars that I have. According to the dictionary, a derelict car is something that's abandoned by the owner. All my vehicles are on my name. They're all been safety checked, and they're all roadworthy. In the summertime, I drive 4 or 5 vehicles. And then in the wintertime, I take those off and I drive winter vehicles. The vehicles are probably anywhere from value of about $2,000 right up to about $25,000 Corvette. So the issue is that we had one complaint. Well, I think if we should have more than one complaint, and it didn't come from my neighbors because I have 4 or 5 letters that they had no problem with me whatsoever. And I think one of the things that should be changed is maybe have a couple complaints, and they should have to come into the town maybe and sign some type of paperwork that there's a problem. So we had a number of visits. The first visit was by the bylaw inspector, and she wanted to take pictures of all my vehicles, and I have signs on my property that says no trespassing. So she says, well, do I have to call the police? So she went out on the road, and within 10 minutes there was police officers there, and she came onto my property and took pictures of all my vehicles. And I think there was so I started, so she said there was vehicles, there was a problem, there was some brush, there was some problem there, she said, and there was some wood that was used for my firewood, and she said she has to have that covered and all kinds of different things. So they were picking quite a few things that didn't comply to the bylaw. So I started to make some changes. I got rid of some of my vehicles at a financial loss to myself, and I think altogether I disposed and sold about 4 vehicles. So I think the bylaw people are there about once a month, and I try to make progress as the time went by. And because I've collected for 30 years, I just can't get rid of everything that fast. It just takes time. I've advertised vehicles for sale, and I've sold a few things, but I just need more time is what I really need to dispose of everything. And because I'm 70 years old, I realize I have to downsize. So the last time that they came, about a month ago, I think there was a total of 6 or 7 visits, and they said there wasn't many changes. They came to my back door. They didn't check my property at all. And there was some changes, but there wasn't as many, I guess, as they would have liked to see. And I was sick for about 4 or 5 weeks, so I couldn't do as much as I wanted to. So I guess that's the gist of the thing. And I'm willing to work with the town of Pelham to downsize and get rid of my stuff, but I need more time. That's about it.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I wonder if any members of council have any questions for you. Councillor Durley and then Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Durley.
Mayor. Thank you for taking the time to explain your side there, Mr. Torres.
Yes.
I was out to your property. You did ask me to come and have a look at it, and certainly staff are the people that will deal with this. But knowing what the bylaw says and knowing your feelings, what might you suggest would be a peaceful, reasonable, and sustainable solution to the problem? Can you give us a hint as to just what you would like to see in the course of actions that will take place to bring you into compliance?
I think one of the big problems is in this whole area out in the country, there's people that have a lot more stuff than I have. And sometimes I'm jealous of it because they got a bigger collection. So, and we're out in the country we're collectors. Most people in the country, and anybody that's ever driven in that area, I think some of the bylaws should be changed for out in the country and in the city, because they're just very hard to comply to all the bylaws when you're living out into the country, and we're all collectors, and I think because we're in a democratic system, we should all be treated fairly. And I see some people, like I said, they have a lot more than I have, And if nobody complains about it, it's fine. So I don't see how that's the democratic system, how that works. How did somebody just decide on Nick has too much stuff when there's people everywhere that have more than I have? And I talk to them and they don't have any problem at all because nobody complained. So the complaint system should be changed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, and we're actually starting that process, and it is on our committee agenda later on this evening. After council, we have committee, and there is a report there that directing staff to start along that process. So your comments can help council through that. Councilor Ribbiak, you had a question as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Mr. Torses. Again, thank you for bringing this to us. As the mayor has pointed out, this is an issue that's on our plate, and we're concerned about it, and we're working on it. But I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. The first is, I have the sense that you have, at some fundamental level, a disagreement with the bylaw as it applies to you. Did you look into the prospect of challenging the bylaw enforcement's position through the Property Standards Committee? Were you aware of it? Did you consider doing it?
That faintly, I remember that I could have appealed it.
Yeah.
So I would be exempt from the bylaw. Is that correct? If I would have, and of course, to appeal it, if I remember, it was a $350 fee. Am I correct?
I think it's a bit higher than that yet.
Oh, it's even higher.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
that's
so.
probably what dampened it, because I'm thinking, one person had caused all this confusion and all this money that was spent on it by one person. And obviously it wasn't my neighbors, because I have 5 or 6 letters of my immediate neighbors that no trouble at all with Nick for 30 years. So this one person had all this power over everybody, over the town of Pelham, over myself, caused me a lot of stress, a lot of financial problems. So is that the way it's supposed to work? How one person via telephone call could cause this turmoil and this uproar? I've talked to numerous neighbors, and they all say there's something wrong with the system.
If I may,
Another question?
Mr. Mayor. So what you're saying is, and I think I understand it well, that the appeal process is discouraging because of the
fee.
of the size of the fee?
Yes, and there was no guarantee anything was going to come out of it. Or do some people, when they appeal it, do they actually get somewhere with that appeal? There must have been a lot of cases already that has happened. Did they get anywhere?
My understanding is that it has been effective. My understanding is it isn't used very often, and others can correct me if I'm wrong. But that's really kind of besides the point. I just wanted to.
Because of the cost.
Yeah. Okay. But that's important information for us to have, Mr. Torses, and I appreciate that. May I ask another, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Thank you. Now,
Try and keep it as general as possible, as you've done.
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to understand that you are asking us to consider giving you more time than the bylaw enforcement people have given you. Is that what I'm understanding?
According to the article that was in the Tribune, when the bylaw people were there and they did an article, it was understood that I have as much time as needed, long as there is progress. That there are some changes that I'm trying to comply with the bylaw. That's where there was no actual time limit of 1 month, 2 months. I mean, it's just impossible to get everything done. If you're trying to sell a $25,000 Corvette,
Yeah.
you can't sell that overnight. It takes time. It might take 6 months, might take a year, might take longer to find the right buyer. That's one of the issues.
if I may, Mr. Torres, I understand that you want us to understand the issues with the bylaw enforcement process, and I can well appreciate that, but I do want to understand if you're asking us for something specific as well. Is there a time limit that you've been given that you want us to extend?
There was really no time limit given to me.
Okay.
There wasn't a time, they said they were gonna give me as much time as I needed, as long as there was some progress.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
And I have another question too. I've talked to a lot of people, and it's something about this bylaw and what their power is to come on your property. If my property is no trespassing, trespassers will be prosecuted. According to this book here, in the landowners, it says that anybody that comes on your property and the property is posted, no trespassing, they cannot come on the property without a search warrant. Is that correct or incorrect?
Mr. CAO, can you comment on that? It's kind of a different, it's a different issue. There's the bylaw itself, and then there's the enforcement of the bylaw. And council, I'm going to say this, council has discussed it. We've talked about it here in this chamber. We've made some changes to the way in which the bylaws are being enforced, effective January 1st. Council had that discussion about education being a very important component, and respect and courtesy. So, it would be similar to anything else. You knock on somebody's door, see how they're doing, that kind of thing. So, that's my understanding of it. Mr. CAO, can you comment any further and add to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it depends. Under some legislation, the province does allow entry onto private property. In the case of a property standards issue, for example, it's governed under the building code. And the building code, the provincial legislation does allow local bylaw enforcement to enter for the purpose of inspection, as long as the bylaw that is passed by council has that authority in it. Bylaws being enforced under other legislation may not provide that, what is known as power of entry. And in certain cases, the bylaw officer cannot enter onto private property for certain enforcement. So it really is, it depends on what the issue is and what legislation the bylaw officer is actually, in fact, working under.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is time for council to ask questions as opposed to yourself. You had time for a presentation. So I wonder if there's any other questions from members of council at this time for Mr. Torres. Councillor Papp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Mr. Torres, what exactly was the complaint against you?
The complaint was that I had derelict cars on my property. And as I mentioned before, according to the dictionary, a derelict car is abandoned by the owner. I owned all those vehicles. They were not abandoned. They all were roadworthy. Well, not all of them. At the beginning, there was a couple, and they're gone. I got rid of, like I said, about 4 vehicles. Whatever I've got left now are all roadworthy and safety checked by mechanic.
Mr. Mayor, and I don't want to belabor this, and thank you, Mr. Torres, for that complaint was put to you in writing, the reference to the word derelict vehicles.
That, apparently, the person that complained phoned it in.
Right.
And that's all there was.
That was what was conveyed to you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's,
Okay.
thanks,
Thank
that's
you.
what I want to know.
Right.
Any others? Thank you very much, Mr. Torres, for your presentation and for answering the questions that we had.
Oh, and also, Mr. Mayor, I have 2 of my neighbors here, one across the street, one down the road, and they would like to say something, I presume?
They have provided letters, I think, and
Yes.
so
We've got
council has received those.
And can they come
And
up and say some
They
words here?
needed to register as a delegation.
I thought that was taken care of already. I mentioned that to Nancy that they were gonna, would like to say a few words.
Yeah, unless,
And is that a problem for them to come up, to take a few minutes?
it would be up to the will of council to hear whether that's the case or not. Does council want to hear from the couple neighbors? I think we've received a lot of information from you right now.
No, I understand that, but I'd still like to have them come up. They show an interest in that.
Mr. Torres, I'm not seeing overwhelming response from council. It is something, so we would encourage them to come back later on to a different time to speak about this, and I do have, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a motion by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the information presented by Nicholas Tarzis regarding compliance with the property standards bylaw on country property agricultural land be received. As council would know, and thank you again, you spoke about the definition for derelict vehicles, you spoke about different rules for urban and rural, you spoke about whether one complaint can trigger the entire complaint process or whether it should be more than one, whether a complaint should be written and not just a phone call, the cost of an appeal, and the time frame. So I think those are all things that you spoke about that will be captured and will help council as we move forward and discuss compliance with bylaw at our committee meeting. Okay?
Okay.
Councillor Clark?
If I could, this isn't a question or a question for Mr. Torres, but further to his question about having someone speak to this problem, this is, we're obviously getting pushback on this, and we have made progress, and we do have changes coming in the new year, which we hope will remedy some of this. But perhaps if we put a time limit on these next two, I'm just speaking for myself, we can all talk about this, but if we put a quick little 2-minute time limit on these other speakers, just to clear the air, keep things moving, I feel that would be fair enough.
Okay, it would be the will of council to do that.
Correct.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that we should vote on this motion, and if there's a motion that we should hear the other two speakers with us, you can certainly move that, okay? Going to call the...
I'll second it.
Okay, we'll call this motion first, and then unless there's any further discussion on this. There being none, I call the question on the motion to receive Mr. Torzis's presentation. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Clark? Do you want to make that motion then? That we
Yes.
suspend the rules of
Yes.
procedure and allow...
Council's will to allow the two speakers, give them a 3-minute time limit each, because we do have a heavy agenda this evening.
Okay.
And let's,
All right, and that's second by Councillor Durley. Any further discussion to that? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Tarzis. So we would invite those two neighbors, and I would ask that they would come up to the podium. We have 3 minutes. We do have a long agenda, so that's why we have that. And if you could state your name and your address for the record, that would be very helpful. Go ahead, sir.
Your Honor and Councillors, my name is Ross McMillan. I live at 569 Sumbler Road. I'm a neighbor of Nick Torzis.
And I'm Ron Burkowski. I live at 539 Summer Road, and I'm directly across the street from Nicholas.
Okay. Thank you.
So our concern this evening is that we feel Nick has been, that a complaint has been made against Nick anonymously. We don't know who made that complaint. As he stated before, his property is surrounded by trees. Certainly, it's of no offense to myself or any of my neighbors that I've talked to. So I think my concern is that we're spending a lot of time and effort to try and correct a problem that doesn't exist. As far as we're concerned, there is no problem. And if one person driving by for some reason didn't like what they saw, they have the option of not looking into his property when they go by. Otherwise, we should let it be.
Okay.
I don't have anything really new to add, other than I do agree with Nicholas when he said there should be a difference between urban and rural bylaws. Many of the things that should be supported in urban areas just aren't practical to support in a rural area like we have. I'm directly across the street from Nicholas, and if anybody should be making a complaint about him, it would be me. But there's nothing to complain about. Nick is a very good neighbor. He keeps his yard neat. He trims the grass, does all the right things. And again, I agree with Ross. We're making a big deal over something that should not have been brought up at all. The method of putting it on the table, that is an anonymous phone call or even an anonymous letter, I think is wrong. In any court of the law, a man gets to face his accuser. And I don't think bylaw enforcement should be above the law.
Okay, thank you very much. I wonder if members of council have any questions for our two presenters, Mr. McMillan and Mr. Borkowski, is that it? Borkowski.
B-O-R-K-O-S-K-Y.
Thank you. We do have a letter from you as well.
Yes.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, again, not a question, just some of my own comments. Again, I don't have anything written up, so this is just coming out.
It's supposed to be questions, Councillor.
Questions,
You
okay,
can-
I don't have a question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Papp?
Very quickly, thank you, gentlemen. How long have you been neighbors with Mr. Torres?
30 years.
Yes.
Both of you?
38 years.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others? Thank you. A motion to receive. Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. You can speak to a motion to receive, Councillor, if you'd like to at this point. Councillor Clark?
Thank you. No, just further to this whole situation with bylaw, like, these bylaws have been in place, I have no idea how long, long before. Started this term. I feel we are as a group making progress on it. We have changes coming in January, and I've spoken to almost every councillor about bylaw in private about it. So it is something that is being talked about, and changes are trying to be sorted out. So I guess my message is to the public that we are aware of this problem and we are trying to remedy it. It's a very complicated prerequisite, or whatever you want to call it, that's set here, and we are trying to work through it.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. I appreciate those comments. Others? Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, just for clarity, a phone call was not anonymous with that. The person who made the complaint definitely registered a name. It's just that the name is withheld here. I think that is the policy. Is that just correctly? It's not I could call from a phone booth or a throwaway phone and just say something's wrong here. It's a matter of I called and made the complaint. So, it's not an anonymous complaint. It's a fact that the name doesn't go further than our bylaw people. So that's.
The name is confidential,
Yes.
but the complaint is not anonymous. Yeah. Okay, thank you for making that point. Others? Okay. I'm going to call the question then on that.
May I just ask one question? If with regard to a complainant, are there any guidelines as to who can be a complainant? Like, where does he reside? Is he a citizen of the town?
That's, I don't think there are, Mr. CEO, there aren't any. So that's something that council's discussing, as Councillor Clark indicated. This information is extremely important to council because it allows us to help frame the debate that we're having as we move forward on this. As I stated, we are, some changes have been made with how the reporting structure works, and council's given direction to staff in terms of how we'd like that bylaw enforcement to occur. The next piece is what we're going to be doing later on in the committee meeting that follows, is talking about, well, what are those parameters that we would like to see in the way in which the complaints are dealt with? Is it one complaint? Is it somebody within the town or somebody else? So these are very, very important things that are currently there's one system, and council's looking at perhaps changing it. So thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to call the question on receiving the presentation. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We do have another presentation, and it is by Mr. Dan O'Hara, representing the Heavy Construction Association regarding the site alteration. Thank you for joining us, sir. Please come up to the podium.
Mayor Augustine. I'm sorry, Augustino.
Augustine, that's fine.
Augustine.
Keep going.
Members of council, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the concerns regarding your proposed site alteration bylaw. I am Dan O'Hara, president of O'Hara Trucking and Excavating, Inc. I'm a municipal contractor working in this industry for over 30 years. I am also the vice president of the Heavy Construction Association of Regional Niagara. Our association currently consists of 28 contractor members and 35 associate members. We at HCARN are concerned that implementation of the bylaw as it is proposed would result in substantial increases to the cost of performing the work in your municipality. One of the greatest challenges we face in our industry is the ability to obtain landfill sites close to the projects that we work on. Two very important questions every estimator asks when bidding on a municipal tender are, how close is the dump site? How many dump trucks will be required for the job? From the time of tender notice to tender closing is usually a period of 2 weeks or less. So often a dump site won't be found until well after the bids have been closed. The bylaws proposed would eliminate any chance of factoring into our tenders the possibility of finding, approving, and making use of close available dump sites. The bylaw in its current form would require a long drawn-out process involving application and environmental impact study, hiring in surveyors and professional engineers to assist in the approval process, not to mention the possible challenges by neighbors to the application. This process will run into thousands of dollars. It won't matter if it is a 10-load site or a 1,000-load site. The cost will be the same. The only practical approach by our members would be to bid with the knowledge that we will be hauling outside of the Pelham area. The result would be to increase the number of trucks required for each project in order to maintain the efficient production. To demonstrate the potential increased costs to a project, adding 5 trucks to a job at a cost of $75 per hour per truck. 1 month, that project will have had an additional $75,000 added to the cost. That is just the face value. It does not take into the account the increased truck traffic and wear and tear on the roads in Pelham that otherwise would have been spared the usage. The ratepayers, taxpayers of Pelham, are the ones who will have to deal with the inconvenience of the increased truck traffic and the financial impact for the additional project costs over time. Our association asks that you consider these negative impacts to the ratepayers of Pelham when you debate the bylaw.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I wonder if members of council have questions for our presenter at this time. Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few, if I may. Mr. O'Hara, thanks for making your presentation. We appreciate your attendance here. In the long discussion that we've had about this, it's good to have an opportunity to get some facts on the table, and I'm sure you're the one to present them. And let me congratulate HCARN on its statement with regard to purpose, particularly your reference to indicating that ultimately, I guess the purpose is to build better quality communities for ourselves and future generations. I think that's HCARN's purpose.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask Mr. O'Hara through you, Mr. Mayor, whether HCARN participated in the industry effort to create best practices for the management of excess soil.
One of our members, past president, is Bob Hunter, if I'm not mistaken, is involved in that.
Was involved in that. So you are aware of the document, the draft document, with regard to.
Not personally, no.
No?
But, or not intimately aware of.
But your association has them.
Yes.
Let me frame a couple of questions around that, because obviously there's a discussion as to what best practices are and how they affect the community, and I just want to understand that. The first of those is just to understand what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about bringing fill into Pelham. I'm assuming that what we're talking about is referred to as excess soil from construction sites.
In particular, within your own projects that we are bidding on.
Right, whether from within the community or outside of it, we're really talking about excess soil. We're not talking about what is for want of a better term, that's clean fill. It's not, for example, concrete or asphalt or aggregate. Those things would not be considered clean soil, and that would not be what we're talking about here, is it?
In particular, fill that comes from your projects, but to be honest, concrete, asphalt, if used in a road building process, like a construction road, that it would be considered inert fill, which wouldn't be a contaminant, let's put it that way.
But it doesn't fit the definition of excess soil either.
No.
Right, and within the code of best practice as drafted between the MOE and industry, I think one of the things that is looked at is the management of a site from which material comes, and it talks about qualified people certifying or coming to understand what the nature of the fill is and certifying what is soil, excess soil, versus what is contaminated, right?
Sure.
I think. And I guess the purpose is we've got to find dump sites for clean soil, but presumably that which is contaminated would go to recycling centers.
Certainly, yes. Yeah,
And I
concrete-
think you yourself are involved in one. I think O'Hara Landscaping is,
Our company has crushing facilities, so we do recycle of asphalt concrete.
right. So there's real awareness of the difference between that which is meant to go into soil and that which isn't.
Oh, most definitely. As an industry, yes, we're very aware of it.
Right, so we're talking about the movement of clean soil into Pelham as opposed to contaminated.
Or within the perimeters of Pelham. For example, our company had done a water main for you on Church Hill, just across the street here. And within the works of that was a lot of clean soils that had to be trucked from the job site.
And you knew it was clean because,
Often your own processes, your engineering department will do soil analysis for what's in the materials.
right, but no qualified person would have said, this is clean soil as opposed to contaminated soil, and therefore is something that should go into dump sites as opposed to going into recycling.
If the definition between the soils, concrete asphalt most often will go to recycle. But
Right.
if, for example, you were building a roadway to get to a particular landfill, you could also reuse that. It would be considered a recycled product if you're using it to build the road to get to where you're needing to be. Or farmers, for example, with building roads to their manure pads and what have you, could easily use the concrete and asphalt that's come off the roads without having to recycle it.
One of the best practices, of course, or among the best practices are suggestions with respect to the receiving site. That is, that the receiving site would have been surveyed, would have been understood with regard to water flows, permeability to well water, that sort of thing. Do you get those certificates, or does your industry not really
No,
need to
currently now
understand
it's
that?
not a requirement. In fact, actually, the municipalities, from the engineering point of view, require that a letter of release from the property owners be signed. In other words, if there is soils analysis, that they've actually seen the soils analysis and that they sign off that they're allowing that to be dumped on their property.
Right, so all that you're interested in is having permission to go onto that property, as opposed to an understanding of what the nature of that property is, or its suitability for receiving.
Well, basically, from our industry point of view, if a property owner, farmers, or just somebody wanting to build upgrades around their residence, if they require the material, that's something that we're more than happy to provide if we can.
Right. Not necessarily clean soil, but anything that comes from
Oh,
the site.
that's up to the individual contractors. I couldn't really speak for them.
But your industry supports what, by way of a practice?
I think it's
Your industry
should be
association, I mean.
reasonably considered. Again, I can't speak for the other contractors to that exact question, but it would be my opinion to say recycle whenever possible.
A few more questions, Mr. Mayor, on other things, if I may go on. If I may go on.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Try and keep it to the presentation as much as possible.
I am trying to do that, Mr. Mayor. You've indicated in your presentation that if you can't find dump sites within Pelham, you will need to go elsewhere, beyond
Yes.
Pelham. Well, where would you go?
Any municipality that wouldn't have such a restrictive process as this? So Waynfleet, Welland, St. Catharines?
There are dump sites in Waynfleet, in St. Catharines?
Yeah.
Niagara-on-the-Lake?
Niagara-on-the-Lake, not so much. They have a process too. I'm not really quite familiar with how they do it, but I believe if a homeowner would want to use landfill on their property, I think a member from the town, and this is the way I understand it, so it's not necessarily a given fact, but they would send someone out from City Hall to have a look and to decide whether or not it's a good idea, whether it would have negative impacts.
On the property receiving?
Yes, yeah.
I see. So there must be some sort of process that involves the town council?
I'm not
Or the town hall?
aware of the exact process, so.
Why wouldn't you dump in the landfills?
Well, And by landfills, you mean?
Humberston? Walker on the Thorold Town Line, or south of Grimsby?
Walker's landfill is a very much controlled site. They say unless you've done the testing on it, and in fact, their words are, if we can't eat it, you can't bring it to our site. Minister of Environment, not too long ago, had brought in an issue of SAR and EC, and SAR being salt, road salts, and contamination. They declared that that was a contaminant in the material, and so virtually any one of the municipal roads could very well have a high level of SAR in it. So a place like Walker would not accept it, or North John, I should say.
Humberston?
Far as I know, they probably would accept it. I think there's a charge per load, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it the charge per load that's the issue?
Anything that drives up costs for what ultimately is being paid by the ratepayer, we as contractors would have to pass those costs along through our tender process.
Right, and you indicated, I think, in your presentation that you don't really know how much it's going to cost, and so you have an issue with putting in a cost into your tender, and therefore, what is it, a competitive issue, that you don't know what your competitor is going to be putting into his bid?
Well, actually, yeah, if you crack the nut open, there's an awful lot of things that come into play here. It's, from an estimating point of view, with this bylaw in place, if it were in place, if we were bidding a project here, we would simply bid to haul to another location altogether. Because the costs that we would have to bear, or the property owner would have to bear, ultimately placed back into the tender process, would be prohibitive.
Councillor, can you start to wrap it up, please?
Yes, thank you. What are the costs associated with bringing fill into Pelham? Is there a load cost?
Bringing fill into Pelham, or
Yes,
working
into the
within-
dump sites that currently exist within Pelham, that you're using in Pelham. Are there costs associated with that?
There are, certainly. Costs of any fill sites, a cost of any project.
Is there a fee?
No, I mean cost of trucking. Like
Right, of course.
If you're hauling a great distance, the trucking cost is actually one of the key things we're asking that you consider. Because when we bid a job, as I said, we often don't have a dump site even located at the time of tender close. So when you bid it, and you are lucky enough to be a successful contractor, you then scour the territory trying to find close dump sites to keep the costs in line.
But I guess my question is, do your industry, your association members pay a fee to deliver, to be able to deliver fill to a location which is of
Okay, in other
lower
words,
cost to them?
Is a homeowner charging us to dump?
Yes.
As far as I would say, no.
Doesn't happen.
I guess if a contractor was, did you say doesn't happen?
Well,
I would believe it could very easily happen if somebody had, say, 1,000 load site, and they went to a contractor and said, you can use my site, I'll provide a dozer, here's a cost per load, $5 a load, $10 a load. I could easily see that occurring. So it's not impossible. But is it an industry norm? No. Because actually, finding sites that are free, basically, is what it comes down to, is what we're, as contractors, what we're always searching for.
Okay, Councillor?
Yeah, last question. You were referring in your presentation to increased cost to Pelham for Pelham projects.
Yes.
But it's not only Pelham projects that your association members deliver to Pelham. Presumably they bring loads in from outside of Pelham.
Oh, sure, that can happen.
That can happen.
Yep, can, does.
From St. Catharines, for example, from Welland.
Anywhere. It's basically any property owner that has a need for landfill, be it a farmer looking to build up acreage or what have you, anyone would put the word out to contractors, and so you may get the fill coming from North End St. Catharines. Not likely because it's such a great distance, but every contractor is generally going to go to the closest dump site that he can find.
Okay, thank you very
Mr.
much. Thank you for that. We do have another councillor that would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Just very briefly, your comments with respect to increased cost for increased trucking to take it out of the municipalities, well documented across Ontario. The other side of the coin, though, that we have to wrestle with is uncontrolled dumping on particular sites that impact neighbors. And I just wondered if your industry has put its mind to that very issue, and, you know, if they have, if they would be willing to come forward with some suggestions to us as we wrestle with this issue, because in fact, it's not necessarily just the trucking of fill in our community. It's the uncontrolled dumping that has the impact on the environment, the neighbors, the water tables, et cetera, that we're concerned about. And so has the heavy industry, your industry, looked at that and looked at best practices to guide you in terms of assessing a site and to knowing when, in fact, you've reached, this site's full. We're not going to take it up a berm 20 feet tall.
As well as an industry, as speaking for myself, certainly if you're hauling into any particular resident, you do everything you can to be sure that they're happy, the resident themselves. Certainly as far as bringing materials and impacting in a negative fashion, it wouldn't be something that I would make the call on, of course. I understand you're wrestling with the problem right now with, from what I understand, is has been going on for a while, berm issues and whatnot. But as an industry, it wouldn't really be our place to settle disputes with neighbors, if you understand what I mean.
Just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yeah, and I understand that, and I wouldn't have an expectation that your industry would get involved in a dispute between neighbors, but it would seem to me that it would be incumbent upon your industry to wrestle with that issue, because as this issue grows, and it is growing as there's more urbanization taking place and less fill sites that are willing to take fill, your industry needs to look at that and look at what the impact of the dumping and the filling that is having on the surrounding territory, not just on the neighbor. So it seems to me that just from a moral standpoint, if nothing more, it seems to me that your industry needs to take a lead on that and start, instead of just faulting councils for passing bylaws that control the amount of fill, to enter into the discussion and try and come up with a constructive solution that works for your industry and works for our municipality or other municipalities, so that A, we control costs, but B, we
Councillor,
allow you
this is
to
the time
function.
for questions.
No, I was asking a question. So I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Okay. As an industry, we certainly are concerned of what you've already indicated. And in fact, I was on the dump site task force committee for a year plus. More an issue to the Minister of Environment, the way they treated all municipal contracts as a brownfield cleanup. It was more like they cut and pasted the rules for brownfield cleanup and applied it to municipal work and all works for that matter, which was which caused a great concern for our industry. So one of your members here, one of your staff was actually chairing the dump site task force committee for a short period of time. The arguable point when we're bidding municipal jobs, the Minister of Environment would see the municipality as the generator of the fill. And as an industry, we've accepted or say not challenged that to the point where we probably will have to someday we're going to be confronted with putting it back to the municipalities that we're bidding to, that you are the generators of this material. It is your responsibility. Right now, they write into the tender process that the contractor is to deal with the materials. But if challenged in court, the Minister of Environment would actually side with the contractor and say to the municipalities, and this would be a very serious negative impact to staff, I'm sure, that you are the ones that own the material, therefore you're the ones that should be dealing with how to get rid of the material. We as an industry are trying to, in a very careful way, work with you.
Well, thank you for that.
There is a huge expense, and it is not just a local Pelham issue. This is something that the Minister of Environment has been dealing with. The Ontario Sewer Water Main Association has been in talks with the ministry, trying to come to agreements. So some of the issues you're talking on are probably beyond my powers to do anything about. One thing we found that in the dump site task force committee, that there's really nothing we can do in regards to the Ministry of Environment and the rules.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark?
Just one question for Mr. O'Hara, if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor. We are trying to craft some kind of a fill or dumping bylaw. It's called a site alteration bylaw. But I understand that Waynfleet has one and has had one for a number of years. So if we could just, in 5 minutes or less, do a hypothetical situation where you had a load of, let's just call it clean fill right now, okay? And you had a job and you're way out in Waynfleet and you wanted to dispose of that in Waynfleet versus this exact same scenario here in Pelham. Where I'm going with this is to find out how theirs is working or how theirs is not working so that we can make ours work.
That's a very good question. I'll be honest, I can't really speak on it. I don't believe we've ever worked in the municipality of Waynfleet. So Niagara-on-the-Lake, on the other hand.
Niagara-on-the-Lake, I believe, has one. I think St. Catharines, I'm not sure about St. Catharines.
No.
Perhaps Mr. Larmer did a little research earlier on. He may know. Does St. Catharines have a site
I
alteration?
can't recall off the top
Okay,
of my
that's
head.
fine.
It's been some time since we've had that report in front of us.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I realize that.
I would say St. Catharines does not have a bylaw
Yeah.
necessary. I'm aware that in the residential areas, they have issues if one neighbor fills his backyard in too high and floods out the other neighbor. Basically, their bylaw, if I'm not mistaken, simply states, do not adversely affect drainage of your neighbor's property. Not tell you what to do or control it, but simply say, don't adversely affect your neighbor.
But my question to you is how does that affect, okay, you load your truck from point A and now you're going to dispose of soil either here in Pelham or in, let's say, Niagara-on-the-Lake. What are the two scenarios? What's the difference between those two? One has a site alteration bylaw and we do not at this point in time. So where my question is what practices are you using there? And I guess it's a double question then, and what parts are you not happy with that we could use to perhaps in the design of ours?
Well, again, town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, the dump sites are very few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cost of doing business in town of Niagara-on-the-Lake is higher because we do actually haul outside of the perimeters to sites that we have. We tend to often work with farmers quite a bit. Most often the farmers are in need of ravines filled, headlands raised up, etc. So quite often our sites are traveling from Niagara-on-the-Lake into Thorold South or points beyond. In fact, today we did a project in Stony Creek and I had to haul back to St. Catharines, which is a huge expense to the project.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that's being paid for by the owners themselves in this particular case.
Okay. Thank you. Others? Thank you very much for your presentation and for answering all the questions. The questions were longer than the presentation, but we certainly appreciate you being here to answer those questions that we had. Thank you very much, Mr. O'Hara. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the information presented by the Heavy Construction Association of Regional Niagara regarding site alteration be received. Any further discussion on that? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you to our presenters. Next on the agenda is supposed to be the report of Regional Councillor. You'll see that Councillor Beatty is not here this evening. He indicated to me that he gave an update at our last council meeting, and committees will now start again in the new year on the 8th and the 9th of January, and then Regional Council the following week. So we did approve the budget, and I think you may have seen some of that at the region, and that was discussed here. So it's good to have all of that complete for the year. So our next item of business is adoption of minutes. And it has been moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the minutes of the following council meeting be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Regular Council C-32, 2012, from December 3rd, 2012. Comments, questions, errors, omissions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is consent agenda and are there any items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? Councilor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to lift the correspondence item number 4, the letter from the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration, and number 5, the resolution from the town of Grimsby.
Thank you. Others? It has been moved by Councilor Papp, second by Councilor Durley. The following consent agenda items be received and approved. 11.1, information correspondence received to December 12, 2012 as follows. Items, sorry. Oh, so, I'm sorry. So 11.2.
Yeah, it's the way the e-agenda.
The ordering isn't correct here. It's gotten me confused, but I hope nobody else is. So there are 3 items of correspondence, and they include the Niagara Region Notice of Public Meeting to implement the new Niagara Region Environmental Impact Study Guidelines. The second, Niagara Region Wind Farm Notice of Draft Site Plan and Notice of Final Public Meeting. And number 3, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, an update to Council. And then as well, some resolutions. Resolution from the Committee of the Whole meeting of December 3rd, 2012, and the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of December 3rd, 2012. Any items of discussion there from any members of Council? Councilor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think in awareness of number 2, the comment on the Niagara Wind Farms issue deserves to be brought forward, because even though, to the best of my knowledge, there will be no turbines in the town of Pelham, there are many people that are very interested in the town of Pelham of these things that are happening elsewhere. So I think the important thing is that there's an open house information session which will be convened on Wednesday, February 6th at the Old Pelham Town Hall in the afternoon from 1 until 4. I think to get that information out, because there are people who are interested, and I think it's important that these people be notified. I'm sure the group will be advertising it more as the day draws nearer. However, just to keep it on the radar screen, I'd like to make that public tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We were part of the initial phase of the study area, a 2-kilometer swath, but we're no longer part of that study. No properties in the town of Pelham, although some close to the town of Pelham, the other side of Victoria Avenue, are included. So thank you for that, Councillor. Anything else on any items under consent agenda? There being none, I call the question on those items. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Councilor Durley, you lifted 2 items. The first, the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a notice that there is definitely something I think we should take advantage of, and that is the Volunteer Service Award that's offered by the province. And the nominations are open until January the 25th. It states that we can nominate 9 individuals, and they're looking for youth. So 3 of these folks should be from the youth sector of our population. I would request staff direction to perhaps ask Ms. Van Ravensway in the Community Services Department to explore people who are deserving of such an award, giving their time and energy, and I think it would be remiss if we didn't reward our people, or at least recognize our people who are doing the volunteering. A youth that does come to mind, and we received very good news today from Aviva that the project that Mariah Buns did put forth, we did get into the finals with that, or she did get into the finals with that. It's initiatives like this that perhaps would really be showing that these type of people are deserving of that order. So I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to pursue this endeavor and take advantage of the initiative.
Okay, thank you. Is there, along with receiving the item of correspondence?
Exactly, yes.
Councillor King, will you second that motion?
I will.
Okay, thank you. Discussion to that motion? Very straightforward. Pleased that you raised it. I'm going to call the question on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item, Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is the resolution from the town of Grimsby, which supports a resolution from the city of Toronto as well as the city of Mississauga. And what it does is addresses some of the issues that are faced across the province by appeals that are going to the Ontario Municipal Board. There is a concern that a made-in-Toronto decision is not the best decision for small-town Ontario, and sometimes the folks that come down, even though they're given better evidence, sometimes makes decisions that are not good for the local municipality. So I would like to make a motion to support and endorse the resolution by Grimsby that looks to improve the service that the OMB is going to give, and to give the local authorities the autonomy, especially in planning issues that I feel we do deserve. So I'd like to bring this to the table, making a motion on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Kersey, discussion to it? Councillor Kersey, since you seconded it, and then Councillor Rubiak.
It may sound odd that I seconded the motion and then immediately asked for an amendment to the motion, but I would like to have the reference to Toronto struck. I don't think the Toronto motion is as applicable as the Mississauga motion. I think the Mississauga motion is a little bit more applicable to our situation, and it also talks about having public consultation and input by the ministry as it undertakes a review of the municipal board. So I would put forward that amendment, if I may.
Just as a point of clarity, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Mayor, the motion that I made was to support the town of Grimsby.
Yeah, but it makes reference, Councillor Durley,
If you
to
want
the
to remove the
Toronto.
reference to Toronto, I have no objection to that.
You want to support and endorse the motion to, the resolution from Grimsby, and what you're suggesting is amendment to support it, but to remove the piece regarding the City of Toronto.
That is correct.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Clark, thank you. Any discussion regarding that amendment? There being none, I call the question on the amendment only. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. And now to the main motion as amended. Are there other, Councillor Kersey, anything further? Councillor Rubiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm going to find myself in the position of voting against that motion. The motion, as I understand it, is to abolish the Ontario Municipal Board. The OMB it represents the pinnacle, I guess, of the appeal process, an appeal process which is available both to citizens within a municipality as well as the municipality itself. And it represents, I guess, the closest thing to an impartial third party that's available to the process to examine and judge or consider motions that are brought to it. I would certainly be in favor of a study to determine how it might be improved or amended or somehow made more relevant, somehow to take into consideration the issues that I know that a lot of people have with regard to the OMB. But I'd be concerned, Mr. Mayor, that if the OMB were to be abolished entirely, that there wouldn't be a fair, impartial, separated process left. I don't know what it would be. Would we be going to court? Would be expecting judges to make decisions at the end of an appeal? It seems to me that we need an appeal process. The OMB may not be the perfect one. It certainly isn't in anybody's estimation, I think, but I think we still need one. So I'm not sure that I would want to vote in favor of abolishing it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Others to the main motion as amended? Councillor Kersey?
Mr. Mayor, if I could speak to Councillor Rubiak's comments, that's precisely, Councillor, why I asked that Toronto be struck and that we support Mississauga, because if you'll note in their summary, they asked the ministry to conduct consultations with the public with reference to the position they put forward. So I view that as a jumping board to, in fact, force the review of the OMB through public consultation, and perhaps that would lead not necessarily to the abolition, but to a modification and a massaging of the process.
Thank you. Councillor Rubiak?
Thank you. Then I wonder whether we mightn't amend, look at amending the motion to indicate that we're not looking to abolish, but we are looking to for a study to improve, to amend the OMB, that process, as opposed to being supportive of a resolution petitioning the province to abolish.
Okay.
And I would make that motion. If there's a seconder, then I guess we can.
Okay, so now you're going to make an amendment to do what, sir, specifically? And
Well, I think the motion in front of us is to support the town of Grimsby resolution petitioning the province to abolish the Ontario Municipal Board. And I think the motion that we ought to be looking at is a motion to encourage the province to review the OMB process and to improve it.
okay, so procedurally, the way to do that, I guess, would be to remove the word the challenge is that Councillor Durley's motion was to support and endorse the position of Grimsby, which is that. Now, we've now taken out part of it. We can take out part of it again. So your motion is therefore or your amendment is to essentially support their position that it be changed, right? So you're going to take that out? Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, in consideration, I guess really wouldn't then be the town of Grimsby's resolution. So I guess the right thing to do, in my view, would be to simply turn this one down, and if we felt it was necessary to do it, and we might, is to develop a motion of our own with regard to the OMB, rather than play around with this one any further.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the input there. What I was trying to get at was precisely what Councillor Kersey brought forward, and that I think we could defeat that, and the motion could be to support the Mississauga version of that, which does just say that requested to amend the Planning Act to provide appeals for committee of adjustment to municipal councils, and that the municipal affairs and housing be requested to have a look at the process and do a better job of it. So I think that's basically, I think, where Councillor Kersey was going, and that was my intention in the first place. But just bringing the resolution that was before us from Grimsby was the way for me to get it to the table. But I would have no problem in defeating that and recommending that we do the Mississauga, support and endorse the Mississauga.
Okay, so now you want to amend the, so what's the way forward here? We're
Hold
debating.
on this and defeat it, and we'll bring forward the motion to support the,
Okay, you want to do
support
that?
the Mississauga.
All right.
I think that'd be the
Any other speakers
cleanest
to
way
it?
to do it.
I'm going to call the question on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is defeated. Councillor Durley, you want to bring forward a motion then to support and endorse the resolution from the City of Mississauga? Is that
City of
correct?
Mississauga, their resolution 0172-2011.
Just for your information, Councillor, there is a piece in here, because you spoke against it, I'm going to say this. Number 1 says, requested to amend the Planning Act to abolish the OMB. So this motion has it as well.
Can we change that word abolish to revise the?
It's your motion, that's
Yes,
why I raised it.
I would have no problem with that. Yes, thank you.
What I might recommend is a couple of things. We have different approaches, I see. It sounds like some members of council want to do some work on this. What I would suggest is maybe, so that we don't do it right now, that a notice of motion can be given later on, that a councillor can work with another councillor to draft up what they think that motion should be, that would be amenable to this committee, as opposed to doing it right now and wordsmithing here and there. So I would
Refer
make
this
that.
to PMP?
We could refer this to priorities and planning as well, later this evening or at a subsequent meeting.
At a
That can be
subsequent
done as
meeting,
well.
it's not on tonight's agenda.
So the motion is not on the floor, but I would entertain a motion to refer the matter to PMP. How's that, Council?
Okay, the third time is the charm, right? Yes, I will do that.
Okay, is there a second for that? Councillor Papp. I'm going to call the question on that, and it won't be, I don't think it'll be tonight.
No.
I'm going to call the question on that motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. So look forward to that at a subsequent, yes, Councillor Papp did second that. So we'll look forward to that. Thank you for raising the issue, and of course, in that is also the motion to receive incumbent in that. So thank you for that, Council. The next item, reports from members of council. So let me scroll across to where that is. I have one report, and Councillor Papp has a report. The first report is regarding Christmas in Pelham. The Town of Pelham Council. Thank you. The Town of Pelham Council was excited to partner with the Pelham Business Association for the 2012 Christmas in Pelham Community Celebrations. Excuse me, sir. Please. These were month-long celebrations that included a holiday showcase and downtown stroll in downtown Fonthill on November 7th, Christmas open house showcases in the shops of Ridgeville from November 8th to the 10th, and also 2 Ridgeville Art Studio tours. Bev Sneath and Kimberly Meckrell also participated in open houses as well. This is all part of the Christmas in Pelham. Additional events included the Fonthill United Church Home for the Holiday House Tour, the Village Artists Art Show and Christmas Tea at the Fonthill United Church, the 21st Annual Pelham Community Food Drive on December 1st, Temperanceville in Peace Park, which is beautifully displayed outside here, and it will be started on December 1st and will still be there till New Year's Day. The 12 Days or So of Christmas, which was performed by the Treblairs at Holy Trinity Anglican Church. I look to our clerk because she's a member of that group. Fonthill Business Open Houses on December 7th, and the 15th Annual Pelham Santa Claus Parade, activities by the fabulous Fenwick Lions at Centennial Park in Fenwick on December 8th. Also, I was very pleased to participate in the 51st Annual Fonthill and District Seniors Party on December 11th, and there were a number of free skates as well through the holidays, and I think there's a few more coming up as part at the Pelham Arena. There were also our share of turkey raffles on succeeding Friday evenings. The Royal Canadian Legion, the Fonthill Volunteer Firefighters Association, the Fenwick Volunteer Firefighters Association. Special thanks to all those that put on these events, and special thanks to the dedicated elves that decorated our town on the early morning of November 22nd. It was led by the head elves, Paul Ryan and Gail Balchus Chataway. The town looks wonderful with all of those decorations, so thank you very much to those individuals. And special thanks to the members of the Christmas in Pelham Community Committee who helped the town staff coordinate events and promotions. And since the town was involved with a financial contribution this year, I would expect that council can look forward to a report and evaluation of that coming up in the new year. Until then, on behalf of council, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all. Councillor Papp, do you have similar greetings from the Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, we have greetings from the Chamber of Commerce to all the members of the business community and the general community of Pelham. Best wishes for a great year of cooperation and efforts to improve the business atmosphere throughout. Very briefly, our final meeting of the year was December 10th. We had a very enlightening presentation by Stephen Fisher, Executive Director of the Wallen Recreational Canal Corporation, and the highlight was the canoe and kayak championships that will be held here in the city of Welland during the last week in July, first 3 days of August. We have people from all over the world coming in here to use these facilities, and I think all of us should be watching this carefully as this unfolds. It's part of a run-up to the Pan Am Games, and also preparations we heard are being underway that it's a strong possibility that our canal not far from here will become the site nationwide for Olympic testing and athletes who participate in summer games, which would be just incredible. We had business after 5, and the mayor and I attended on December the 12th, and we met the new publisher of the Tribune, and we got to know that they're expanding their efforts to coverage in that, and that was important to hear. This week, a couple events, one event, December 20th, Sandra Papatullo will be here on Thursday. For those who are interested, she is a candidate for the Ontario Liberal leadership and will be at Riverstone at 12 noon. And finally, we were advised that over the course of the year, similar to our friends at the PBA, we were able to attract 68 new members, which is phenomenal. It's the largest growth we've had in the chamber in its history. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your report and for your ongoing work on the Chamber of Commerce. The next item of business is staff reports requiring action. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. The Council approved the completion of the capital program expression of interest for the Municipal Infrastructure Investment Initiative asset management funding for the following project: the Town of Pelham Asset Management Plan. And the Council declares that the information that is provided in the expression of interest is factually accurate, and that the Town of Pelham is committed to developing a comprehensive asset management plan that includes all of the information and analysis described in Building Together a Guide for Municipal Asset Management Plans by December 31st, 2013. Discussion regarding this? I have a question for the treasurer, and that is in relation to the next piece about this, and is it embodied in this motion about this grant from the province? Can you just explain that, please?
I'm sorry, are you referring to the second stage that this expressionist interest is asking for?
Yes.
Yeah. This is step 2 of the original program for the capital asset management financial plan that we were awarded $25,404.18 for. They've asked us to come forward with an expression of interest on a capital project that is either a health and safety issue or emergency issue. So we identified, I discussed with the CAO that the Pelham Street one was one that we put off for a number of years that could come forward because of the safety issue. And we put together an expression of interest for January 9th to have that project move forward based on the funding that they will provide.
Thank you. So that will be coming forward at our January 7th meeting. Is that what you're suggesting, or is that included in this?
Yes, this allows me to prepare the expression of interest and submit it with the parameters that are in here, being that the funding will be, or the project cost will be $2.781 million, and it will be funded, asking for up to $2 million in funding from the provincial government, and the remaining coming from our DC and reserves.
Okay. One other question in terms of the timing of when one finds out about this.
They haven't made that clear. My understanding is they're hoping before March 31st, which is their year end. So that is what I've been told to date.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else from other members of council on this? I think it's certainly appreciate staff bringing this forward as a recommendation to council that we try to get this funding from the provincial government of up to $2 million for this project. As you indicated, is something that we've had to move the yardstick along on for a few years. So this would be redoing the roadway along Pelham Street from College to Pancake. And if we could get these dollars, which I think would be 90-cent dollars, that would certainly help move that project forward. This council, when it debated the budget for capital for this coming year, was concerned about the costs for the project and the broad breadth of the project and how that changed as a result of the engineering. So, thank you very much to staff for putting this forward. I think it's important for us to proceed with this. It's certainly a community need that has been identified by that school and others in the area. So let's hope that we can get the funding for this. I'm going to call the question on the motion before us. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is presentation consideration of bylaws. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that leave now be given to introduce the following bylaws and dispense with the reading of the bylaws. 1, being a bylaw to appoint Robert Lindberner as Bylaw Enforcement Officer and Property Standards Officer for the Corporation of the Town of Pelham. 2, being a bylaw to appoint Dale Minor as Building Inspector, Bylaw Enforcement Officer and Property Standards Officer for the Corporation of the Town of Pelham, and to repeal Bylaw 3014, 2008. 3, being a bylaw to appoint Saskia Holditch as Bylaw Enforcement Officer and Property Standards Officer for the Corporation of the Town of Pelham. 4, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a service contract agreement with the Harrington Group Limited as per the proposal to coordinate Ontarians with Disabilities Act compliance dated November 15th, 2012. 5, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 3293, 2012, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of the Town of Pelham Council, its committees, the conduct of its members, and calling of public meetings specifically relating to changes of the date and time for public meetings under the Planning Act. 6, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an addendum to the computer-aided fire dispatch agreement with the City of St. Catharines. And 8, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 3130, 2010, being a bylaw to regulate the noise control of the Town of Pelham. Number 9, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw 1136/1987 as amended for residences at Lookout, and 10 being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 59 to the official plan of the town of Pelham. Discussion regarding these bylaws. I'm going to note that the chief had indicated something regarding the fire dispatch. Chief?
Yes, and it had it listed as an addendum. It's not a carryover from last year. St. Catharines Fire, the city of St. Catharines actually reworked the way they're presenting our dispatch services. If you notice the figure for 13, it's an actual reduction of 14% over previous years, or last year. And what they propose is they use the consumer price index for subsequent increases over the next couple of years. So it's actually a 3-year deal.
Okay, so it's to execute an agreement to the computer-aided
Yes.
fire dispatch agreement.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Comments or questions on that? Comments or questions on any of these other bylaws? Councillor Papp?
Very quickly through you, because unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but just through you to the Director of Planning. The noise bylaw revision, why was this done? Can you just brief me, why was this changed?
It was the result of a normal farm agricultural. I'm sorry?
I can't, go ahead.
It was a result of a noise complaint that was taken in front of the Farm Practices Board, and it was barking dogs. And the issue was that if a dog, under the current bylaw, a dog protecting a farm is considered to be a normal farm practice. So we're clarifying the bylaw so that the dog has to be involved in the farm, not just guarding the farm. So.
I'm in trouble.
I'm sorry?
I'm in trouble.
Well,
but I know what you're meaning. I meant that as, I know exactly what so if the dog's there to protect the interests of the farm.
that's right. If they're protecting the livestock, that's fine. If they're just protecting the property, then it's a bit of a different issue. It's just like being in a residential area.
Okay.
But thank you, but it's for all normal farm practice noise, is it not? It's not just barking dogs.
If the dogs are associated with the normal farm practice, that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Anything, Councillor Papp?
Again, quickly through you, Mr. Alarmer, the amendment to the residents at Lookout, the zoning bylaw, what transpired with our discussions, or maybe I'm at loss, how would this affect those discussions we were having with respect to those lots on Lookout and the contentious issue between the owner and developer? I'm just curious what impact would this have?
Certainly. If you look to the Schedule B of the bylaw that was tonight, Part 13 are the 7 lots that back onto the 4 lots that are fronting Lookout Street. Okay. One of the provisions that's in the bylaw is that the minimum ground floor area for all of those dwellings is 210 square meters, which is the same as the smallest of the dwellings that is on one of the 4 lots that is fronting Lookout Street.
Thank you, Mr. Alarmer, for that clarity. I was just trying to figure that out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask, I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it because there was a little bit of a rumor going around about the bylaw officers. Can we just have a little bit more clarity as to, Mr. CAO, why these are here? And I know it was discussed at the last meeting. Can you just provide a little clarity, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Despite rumor to the contrary, we're not on a bylaw officer hiring spree. This is simply an administrative bylaw change to accommodate the reorganization of the bylaw department from planning to fire. And the appropriate people have to be named in order to be acting in those capacities. So it's simply housekeeping. And for the record, the town is in its employ 1 full-time bylaw officer and 1 traffic officer, and it will remain that way until council sees fit as to expand that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. CAO. I'm going to call the question on this. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that the following bylaws have been numbered a first time, be numbered as follows. Bylaw 3,318 through to Bylaw 3,326 be now considered a second and third time and passed, and the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same, any rule of council to the contrary notwithstanding. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried.
I don't know if you want to move in camera now, if you want to recess that.
Thank you. Council, we do have an in-camera portion, and the suggestion is that we would recess the remainder of the meeting and hold the in-camera portion after committee. So I do have a motion to do that, and if somebody, we did that once before. Councilor Papp, you'll make that motion. It's seconded by Councilor Kersey. That council recess the in-camera meeting and reconvene immediately following the recess the in-camera meeting and reconvene immediately following the Policy and Priorities Committee meeting scheduled for this evening. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. This portion of the meeting is adjourned. Let's take a 5-minute break between this and P&P. Thank you.
You gotta think of something better than this.
Are you having difficulties?
Well, the problem is that when you bring all these things down